You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 315 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. And I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's also my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
Beautiful evening for a Cubs game, Jeremy.
It is, and they are on the West Coast, so they will not be taking advantage of this
Invite them
spectacular weather. Yeah. And neither will you, Pat. You had to suffer through some cold games last week, but no such luck this week. We do have a positive week to talk about. The Cubs having a 4-2 week, and we'll dive into it a little bit more. We'll look at the week that was. We'll preview the week that will be. We'll talk about the Cubs as a whole and some of the news, and to help us break down everything Cubs, you know him from his stand-up comedy. He's the co-host of the Away Games podcast, a longtime friend of this podcast, Kevin McCaffrey. Thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Oh, thank you for asking me. Yeah, I was trying to think as you were dropping the episode number there. 315. Was it 315? Is that what we're on right now? I think this is 3 for me. I think this might be my third visit. Thanks for having me. I listen to you guys frequently too, so it's nice to know what I'm getting into over here.
Yeah, definitely.
So basically, you come on our podcast to save yourself the time of having to listen to it.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, that is a way where most people in my industry would actually listen to the ones they're on even harder. But I am of the many ways in which I am broken. That is not one of them. I will experience this time. I don't need to hear me again. But I'm glad other people are. It's a nice place to be over here.
Yeah, and your podcast likewise is one of our favorites. I know that Pat and I will text about things we've heard independently while listening to the podcast. So definitely, you and Adam do fine work over there.
Thank you. I've also not heard my podcast, but I stand. I think I stand by pretty much all of it, though. That's for sure.
And like I mentioned at the top, the Cubs had a 4-2 week. Last time we podcasted, they took 2 of 3 from the Tampa Bay Rays, which is quite the feat, and then went into San Diego to start a long road trip where they're playing at the Padres, at the Angels, at the Giants, with no days off, all in a row here. And they started pretty well this weekend, taking 2 of 3 from San Diego so far, a game pending tonight as the time of this recording. But I don't know about you, Kevin. Were you as surprised as I am that San Diego is not as good as it looks on paper?
Big time surprised. I mean, I was looking at the records today. They would be a half game ahead of the Cubs in our god-awful division. So real bummer it is going to be a difficult catch in the West for them, but it really does not make sense looking at the roster that they have, how not good they have been. And I don't feel like anyone significantly has been hurt. I mean, they have the lineup that we saw the Cubs, the bullpen carve their way through at the end last week when we got Mark Leiter, who thankfully was not shot into the sun by very angry people on Twitter after one bad game in a year. Him just striking out the heart of the order there was amazing to see. And it's like, yeah, all their pieces seem to be there, so I do not know why they're bad.
Manny Machado in particular has been bad this year, surprisingly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. You look at the lineup and you're like, okay, well, Bogaerts, he's pretty good, and Cronenworth and Soto obviously is good, and Tatis Jr. is back, and his numbers look like he was here the whole season because he's so good.
Yeah, I saw he's up to like 10 homers already.
11 now.
Okay, yeah, that's what. You're welcome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so they're doing really well. The Cubs though, however, have found a formula for success that I think is close to unstoppable. They've determined that if they can give up 1 run or less in a game, they typically win those games. Like they won all 4 games this week when they give up 1 run or less. When they give up more than a run, they lost. So just no pressure. starters and relievers.
I mean, I certainly remember a lot of Twitter after the opening day, the hysteria about, this is the plan. This is the way Jed built the team, to just never score, but to score slightly more than the other team. I do think there should be a difference between like building a good defense and then also building a team that does not score on their own. But yeah, as long as we keep the other teams, it seems like they're winning games that are just like straight. I was talking to Adam about this, but just like straight binary code ass looking games out here, where it's just like really like 1800s baseball scoring going on.
Yeah, it's
and the Cubs are doing it without necessarily demonstrating great defensive prowess. Early in the season, it's saying, "Oh, look, the defense, it looks good," but this defense has I didn't know defense could do this, but apparently it's regressed to the mean a little bit, because the defense is fairly average. It's just league average defense, basically.
I mean, when you think of like just individually around this team, where in terms of what's healthy now, especially with Bellinger not there in center, what even is above average? Obviously, you have the middle infield. Hap, I mean, I think Hap's numbers don't look super good right now, but obviously won the Gold Glove last year. But and I guess Seiya has looked better in right than he did last year. That's been nice. But outside of that, it's a lot of, as you say, it's a lot of average or like below in a couple of places.
I think part of that is the corner infielders are unsettled and not good. So that's a combination. It's one of the reasons they're unsettled is because they're not good. So they keep putting in new people, and it's been a rotation of that. And the corner outfielders, who you just named, Hap and Suzuki, I mean, I don't know. Some people like WAR, some people don't. But if you look at defensive WAR, they're like Hap's a minus 0.6 and Suzuki's like a minus 0.4. I mean, they're not average yet,
right? Under
those metrics, and then first and third have just been awful. So here you are.
Well, and I saw today, I don't know if you guys saw that yet, but that they were working Morel out at first, which was interesting, I guess.
Yeah. Better first than right field on a sunny day, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
It's first has been such a head.
It's been last. First has been last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I think the disappointing season of Trey Mancini has made this even worse. He did,
and yet he looks like Lou Gehrig compared to the rest of the people they play at first base, which is something to think about.
Yeah, he did hit a home run yesterday, but the lack of power and the lack of slugging from Mancini at first doesn't give Mervis any time to start to adjust and try to work out of whatever he's working out of right now. It's first has just been tough. So of course throw Morel over there too, might as well.
What if everyone plays first? What if with that? I mean, can you just overwhelm it with sheer quantity over at first? Play two of them at the same time. I mean, there should be enough to scoop over there. I know we're banning the shift, but if you just put two on the same base over there.
If one of them's Nick Madrigal, it might not count. So you could totally do that.
It's not a full human. I'm not saying that from content wise, but yeah.
Do you think they could maybe try to win over and convince Ohtani to come and play first base? I mean, that would be a new position for him. Why not?
I remember that being talked about back when we had a kind of prettier looking group to pitch from, before DH times. Who knows? I mean, maybe we're going throwback. Tucker Barnhart's still hitting, trying to bring back the pitcher hitting vibes. So, maybe we do shift Ohtani over to first. Well, I mean, I'm sure Shohei Ohtani is sitting over there in Anaheim just like, man, can I get me a piece of that 27-32 Chicago Cubs right now? I would love.
So for people of a certain age, first base for the Cubs is much like running back is for the Bears. You grew up with like maybe a Buckner, Durham, Grace, Derek Lee, and before you knew it, you were 40 and you'd had like 4 first basemen. And now you've had, and then Rizzo, of course, but since Rizzo, of course, you've now had, 17 in the last 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And just like the Bears had Peyton and Anderson and a string of like long-term good running backs, then things just kind of fall off. And I don't know what to say about first base. Eric Hosmer was the second best first baseman for the Cubs this year. Who knew?
Yeah.
But still not good at all. I don't know. What do you make of Matt Mervis, though? I mean, this is, look, I get that he only had 74 plate appearances, but he's fairly bad, like almost Tucker Barnhart bad in his 74 plate appearances.
Yeah, they have been. It has been less than what you hoped because he just was so overwhelming. At least stat wise, it seemed overwhelming. I mean, I saw some scouting reports that were skeptical, and I sort of on my own, I thought of course he was an undrafted guy. He hasn't even been not a two-way player for that long. Really, he's a little older. So I understand it, how scouting would maybe not be fully loving it, but yeah, he adjusted to every level so well. And I was particularly impressed by how, after getting sent down to begin the year, when he had a pretty good argument to just be the first baseman, he kept crushing the ball in Iowa. Like, he hit well. And I feel like that is a particularly tough situation to go into, to have that disappointment, to know you have to be really overwhelming to get up to the majors in his position. But yeah, there's no interpretation of what he's been doing at the plate that makes it look like he's good right now, for sure. I sort of my worries about Matt Mervis, I put in the same sort of emotional space as my worries about the Cubs missing out on Zach McKinstry, who's doing well in Detroit. It's valid, but I have too many other things to sweat and worry about. So I'm just still hopeful Mervis will just be good. And this is a longer than you'd like adjustment period. And sort of say, it's not like there's a ton of better options right now. I mean, I guess Trey Mancini, but
I think he may have also fallen into the trap, not by choice, but the Cubs fan trap of desperately wanting him to succeed, because the Cubs fans have been desperately wanting a position player to come up from the minors and succeed for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And every time they feel like somebody's close, their hearts get broken. It's Brendan Davis doesn't work, never gets here, or everybody else sort of just kind of putters out, in double A, triple A, and you're just somebody please come up and be the homegrown talented player that the Cubs desperately need. And I think a lot of people put their eggs in the Mervis basket because he was the next guy who was ready. And you look back at the minors, and I don't think there's necessarily a consensus player who's ready to come up, say, tomorrow or whatever. Which is why the whole situation with Miguel Amaya is so interesting, because I had almost forgot about him after 3 years of not playing baseball. He's younger than Matt Mervis, by the way, by a year. But he just kind of popped up out of nowhere. They're like, oh, yeah, we got this other catcher here. And he's made the most of it in his early going. But, yeah, somebody, whether it's Amaya or whether it's Morel or Mervis, it'd be nice if somebody could just lock down a position for the Cubs and go into the offseason without having 5 holes in the lineup next year.
It really is. It has been a while since just a no doubt win of a player coming up. I mean, I would classify Morel to this point as a win of a player, but the problem is, I think, we're seeing him readjust again right now. He's slumping a bit, striking out. He's always going to be a big strikeout guy, it seems, but he's in real heavy swing and miss period right now. But, Morel's a guy who's, I think, ideally, a reasonable ideal hope for him is a guy who starts maybe most of the games in a week and shifts around places. But there hasn't just been a guy you could just put in one part of the lineup that's come up through the minors since Nico, I guess. And even Nico, Nico's a very good player, but I think it is weird. I think because of how starved we've been and because of how much everyone likes Nico, people seem to think he's better offensively than he's ever shown. I think
he's slightly above average as a hitter.
Yeah, which is, and with his defense and sort of the new stolen base element that he's bringing to the table this year, that's a good player. But the guy's basically, as you say, it's league average, a touch above offensively, and that's the last time we had a guy we could really just put in there from the minors.
Looking at some of the other positives from the weekend, we had another outstanding performance by Marcus Stroman. This guy has been so much fun to watch pitch. and he's having such a great year.
Two outstanding performances by Marcus Stroman, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
back to back, and after single-handedly carrying the Cubs to victory against Tampa Bay, comes back and has a great performance in San Diego. Is Marcus Stroman a Cy Young candidate if he keeps this up? Is he a guy who is in this conversation? And we'll get to what the Cubs need to do to either be competitive or sell off. And so he's a guy who we need to be paying attention to of, is this a guy you can extend, or is this a guy that is going to do his option and move along, or is this a guy you're going to trade at some point? And if he continues to pitch this way, that decision's going to come pretty quick.
Kevin, you've got more experience with this than we do, because you being a New Yorker, have probably seen Marcus a little bit more than we have in Chicago. What's your take on him?
Yeah, I have overall complicated feelings about Marcus Stroman, I guess.
Yeah, okay, so leaving that aside.
Yeah, I'm putting that aside. And by the way, I have uncomplicated feelings about how good he's been at baseball this year. I have uncomplicated feelings about how he's one of like 3 baseball players who actually nutted up and supported Pride in any public way. So I'm very pro him stepping up in that way too. I think Marcus Stroman is a guy who's just been good whenever he's been healthy and regular. I mean, like since Toronto, he's a very good pitcher. He is exactly the guy. He was the first guy I wanted from that free agent class. So I was very surprised to see when the Cubs did get him. And obviously he's athletic. He's extra athletic. He's great defensively, as we all know. He is just sort of like, it's weird that he is by far the tiniest starting pitcher in baseball. And also he's like tremendously durable. And I think leading the league in innings right now too. So I think very spry. Oh, the spryest. He's shuffling around. He's dancing. He's got, I mean, like he's, hardly, 80 grade spry on this fella for sure. I think like he's absolutely is in the Cy Young discussion. To Jeremy's question, like, I mean, it's just he's being Maddoxy so far this year, and I think it's weird because coming into this year, I was like, there's never been a clearer he won't be here after this year guy. Yeah. Than this team being where it is, he's gonna opt out, and he's just the clearest guy to deal that you could imagine. But I mean, I don't know. Do you want to? I think it just I have had a very tough time figuring out how badly this team wants to or knows how to compete. But if you want to compete over the next several years, I don't know why you wouldn't try to continue employing a guy who seems to really like it here.
For sure. And, I think sometimes, especially this week with those back-to-back starts, Jeremy, I was both very happy. I mean, what he did against Tampa, coming off a 4-game losing streak when the team wasn't hitting, and by the way, did not hit in that game either. I mean, He scored a run because of an error, right? The one run and 2 fly balls after the error, right? To move the runner, to score the runner. I mean, you're talking, and the next guy struck out. So it wasn't like that was like a what do I call a big rally inning, so to speak. But he did what an ace pitcher actually does, right? He said, okay, we've lost 4 in a row. The bullpen's been getting battered around. I'm just going to take this on me. It's something that never happens anymore. Complete game shutout. How many of those are there in baseball these days? I mean, that's extraordinarily impressive. And so you look at him, and on the other hand, you say to yourself, gosh, he's going to play himself off the Cubs, isn't he? Most players play themselves off the Cubs the other way by poor performance. I look at Ty and I'm like, I wish that Stroman was locked in for 4 years and couldn't get out, but of course he can. And you're right, Kevin. If the Cubs want to keep him, they're going to have to pay him more. And I'm sure they'll have a reason not to, or how he's worth just a little bit less than what he gets.
Yeah,
I think a team that's really aggressively trying to win would lock him up maybe in August, for next year, and not even approach the free agency, because once that happens, once the season's over, he's going to have a lot of other options, and you worry that. And people say, and like, well, he's 32 years old, a 5-year deal, that's way too much, and maybe they're right, but if you think of everything in terms of as the Cubs are prone to do, maximizing absolute value for a player, you just end up with a bunch of players who aren't that great because that's just not how it works. So,
right. No, it's sort of that that classic saying of, I forget exactly who it was. I'm sure it's been a ton of GMs and presidents, but that if you make the right free agent offer, you'll never get the free agent. Basically, you always finish second or third or something. And I think that's a really good point about how the Cubs have approached free agencies and extensions and all that stuff. Is like, yeah, there's no one on this team really who you're like, oh, what a terrible deal. But that also that makes you end up with a roster that doesn't have a top end that can compete for championships. I think the one thing that I think Jed Hoyer does very well is find the 23rd to 26th man on the roster. Like finding Patrick Wisdom as a waiver wire thing. And, he's had good success at the fringes since he's been the guy at the top of the organization, but the fringes don't win you championships. Like
he's so good at that he ends up getting like 8 guys who are like 23rd to 25th.
Yeah. That's the so. It's the like, why don't you build the whole plane out of the black box? Except like in this case, building the whole Cubs out of like part of the plane that does crunch, like not fatally, but you're not walking again if you're in that part of the plane again when it goes down. So yeah, it's I don't know. It seems like Marcus Stroman is a guy who really loves being here, but he's 100% going to opt out. So you got to do one or the other. You either have to trade him or you have to extend him. But I said that about Wilson Contreras last year too. So who knows?
Yes, they sure proved us wrong on that one as well.
Yeah.
Well, but don't you know the value of a supplemental pick after the 3rd round of the draft?
God.
That's not nothing.
No, it's not, Patrick. It's a sure thing. It's what we got Brennan Davis with. So it's a sure thing, slam dunk. I'm still hoping for Brennan to get back, but I just checked the numbers again, and oh baby, not great. So I don't know. And do you even get the comp pick if a guy opts out? I don't even want to. Maybe you guys do know that. I don't, but
yeah, I don't know the rules about that per se. I think maybe you don't. He's not.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So it seems like it's either going to be a trade or an extend or something that makes completely no sense. But yeah.
That's why I kind of wish it sometimes, well, not sometimes, I guess all the times when I think about it, that the Cubs had an owner who wasn't, or a team that wasn't trying to become completely rational. Like you say,
yeah.
If you're going to be rational about every decision, you're never going to go anywhere. I wanted to resign Anthony Rizzo because I like Anthony Rizzo, and I think there's a whole generation of young kids out there like Anthony Rizzo. And you know what? The deal that he probably could have signed for, would it have ended up being more than he was worth? Well, as it turns out, maybe not. But even if it had been, how much worse would it have been? 12 million, 13 million? Who cares, really? In baseball terms, that's really not a lot, especially because they're going to increase ticket prices or beer prices regardless. So, it's all in the wash. At some point, though, having somebody like that in your lineup, as it turns out, would have been really helpful. That's the way it goes.
Would have been super helpful from a baseball perspective, and also just like thinking back to that time when it was 5 years, $75 million, and was the offer that we know was given, and at the time seemed low. And there are certain people, a class of person that I just cannot. It feels like a different species to me that just celebrates the money saved, not paid to. The centerpiece of the greatest era of modern Cubs baseball, people who root for owners to save a little bit of money. The difference in what he would have accepted was what? Like $15 million over 5 years? I mean, like if you get through 5 and 90, I think was the numbers I was seeing in terms of what would get it done from his camp. I think that's exactly the point you're saying, where if you just are making it so your computer system says, yes, this is the right value, then you're going to end up with a lot of 83 and 79s.
And
but you save money on the Mancinis and VRs and all these other guys that you pay $5 million to here and there, right? $7 million.
Totally. Yeah.
And when you do that, you have no room to make a mistake or to do something where ownership says slash payroll, and you trade a Yu Darvish for children who may never play in the major leagues, and you watch.
Thank God they didn't do that with Schwarber. They just cut him.
They just
that
cut
way
Schwarber.
They didn't have to worry about getting prospects to worry about in 5 years. Much easier to remember.
Yes, but we got the pleasure of paying Jock Peterson like $1.5 million less than Schwarber would have gotten, or maybe it was 2.5. Then traded him for Bryce Ball, and that's the end of the Schwarber chain of transactions. I think,
When talking about some of the frustrations from this weekend, it was for me definitely watching Yu Darvish pitch against the Cubs. I love watching Yu Darvish pitch, and I miss him terribly on the Cubs. He's so much fun to watch, and a great personality on Instagram as well. And watching David Ross craft a lineup against a lefty, being the big lefty splits, heavy on the lefty splits for David Ross, and putting out lineups that really lit a fire under Cubs Twitter over what are we doing here? And I know you were equally perplexed as we were, Kevin, on some of these lineups.
Yeah, man, I think Miles Mastrobuoni's fine. I don't think there's an argument on this earth where he should be leading off games. No. It just, and I have been someone who, I'm not like the biggest David Ross believer on earth. I think he's been generally, fine. I don't have huge problems with him. I don't think he seems to have been amazing thus far either. But I do think like he's gone out of his way to make some lineups that like the people on the internet have, like Twitter people have like in mass consensus first guessed and gotten right. Like thinking of like the Hunter Green game where everyone on Twitter was like, but he's a reverse split guy. And David Ross was like, I don't care. And then we got absolutely smoked. Like
we got a hit in that game.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you, Morel. It looked dicey. Was that when Morel broke it up? Was that
one? Yes. Yeah. In like the 7th inning or something, or 8th inning. It was scary. I was there. Yeah. It was cold.
Real 10 out of 10 day. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, I'll say this. When Ross decided to play Mastrobuoni and Barnhart and Edwin Rios, I think what a lot of people forgot is, they have an OPS plus of 78, combined.
Yeah.
Which means that they're not quite a full player combined, but they are still 1/3 of your lineup. Yeah, you look at some lineups and you're like, I don't think we're going to score in that inning when those guys all come up in a row. But I think you exacerbate it when you lead off with the guy with the 32 OPS plus, because he's less than 1/3 of a player offensively, and he gets to bat more times than anyone else.
It's such an own goal there, because lineup construction is, I think, an easy thing to overrate, but it's really easy to not get that wrong, though. Like this is, you can just not put a guy with those numbers first. And it's not like this is a guy who's coming off massive major league success. This guy's been good in AAA. So was Matt Mervis. So have a lot of people been. And it just seems unnecessarily bizarre in a way where it makes you think, okay, is this based on one of these weird statistical projection systems that we're told they have in the front office, Ivy adjacent or something, where, the numbers that before the season when Hoyer was like, I see what Pagoda says and everybody says, but our numbers say we're better. Well, you're not. Your numbers, whatever weird advanced system you have that tells you Miles Mastrobuoni should be first, also seems to be how you get a team with a vaunted run differential that somehow is 7 games under 500 too. You're finding ways to underperform the people on your team, which does not bode well for manager or,
if the Cubs were to create a lineup, Ross were to create a lineup and just put everybody in order of on-base percentage. The highest percentage goes first and keep on going.
Yeah.
You'd have a lineup of, you'd start off with Happ, and then you'd go to Swanson, and then Suzuki, and and Horner, and before you know it, you'd be filling that lineup, and you look back and then you back up. Not so bad, right? All the guys we want to bat more are going to. I mean, it's fairly simple idea. But that's how I think you can have a week where you go 4-2 like they did, and you're excited about that, but still feel very guarded about the future because you realize that in order to get to 4-2, you had to have 4 total like ace performances from your pitchers, because otherwise, you weren't going to win. And even in some of the games where the pitchers did pitch really well, we only scored 1 run or 2 runs, and 3 of those wins. You realistically don't think you're probably going to keep that up forever. And you really would like to actually be a little bit more competitive when, say, your pitcher gives up 3 runs in a game, maybe have a chance to win that game.
Yeah, that would be nice.
No, I worry that someone told David Ross about Chat GPT, and he said, "Well, let me try this out here with a lineup against lefty splits. See what it can give me." And it's this is way better than Ivy. Look at this, spit it out for me, perfect.
Yeah. Oh man.
By the way, in the Cubs' last 22 games, they've won 8 games, and in every one of those 8 games, they give up 2 or fewer runs. Just saying.
Unbelievable. No,
you said the game. You got the game plan. You said it. You guys said it right off the top. Just don't give up runs, and then you win. The end.
So I guess that brings us to where are the Cubs now? But at the end of this, we're in June. Now's the time.
Still San Diego, Jeremy.
Still San Diego. We've got. Now the wheels could fall off this road trip here. Justin Steele is going to be out with forearm issues here, which is absolutely terrifying. And so the wheels can absolutely fall off. But if they keep this 4-2 momentum, if they have a decent enough road trip, and you're in a division where currently, as of the time of this recording, the Milwaukee Brewers are 32-27 atop your division. The Pittsburgh Pirates 31-27, and
Amazing.
The Cubs are 26-32. Now, the Brewers, atop your division, with 32 victories, have a -19 run differential in first place. So the division is available for the taking. Is this now? It was last year.
Now keep in mind, Jeremy, the Cubs are also 3-8 in the division so far this year. Which is an interesting fact. Against better teams, the Cubs have actually played better.
Right.
Against their own division, they played poorly. I don't know why.
Which is also a challenge. You can't do that in a now balanced schedule. You do not have the same number of opportunities to make up for, whoops, we got swept by Cincinnati later in the season. You need to capitalize on those now. Now, the Cubs were in a similar position last year, couldn't wait to sell off. We're very nervous when they actually reeled off more victories than they wanted to because they were trying to actively be bad and sell off.
The Cubs in September, when they went on that 11 out of 12 stretch where they won games, when they clearly couldn't win a division, but they could certainly ruin their draft position, and they certainly did. The Houston Texans of last year, we'll call them.
Yes. Well, Lovie Smith working for Ivy over there. That's nice.
Yeah. So the Cubs have chosen. They've looked at the division in the past, very recent past, and said it's bad, but we're not going to go for it. We will punt and let someone else take it. Is this the year where they say it's bad? We can add and we can go for it. We've got this last year of Marcus Stroman that we know of for sure. We've got some players. We've got a chance. It's divisions for the taking. Should we go for it? Is that the Cubs team that we're looking at here, or are they just gonna be treading water until they get to the close enough to the trade deadline and then sell off the players like they're used to for the folks that are the Cody Bellingers and the other folks that get called on here? Where do you see the Cubs going, and what's it going to take to get there to be a buyer?
I thought in the season preview we did on our away games podcast, I think one of the categories was like try to do an extra specific prediction, and my prediction then was that the Cubs would be at a point where the prudent thing to do would be to sell off, but that Jed wouldn't have the stomach to do it again. And I sort of think that is, it's certainly trending that way right now. I'm not trying to be overly negative because this team is, I weirdly think this team is better than what the record says right now. I think, like, my opinion is that they are a little better than this. But it just, when I look at what do you buy at the deadline, I don't know how much there is there to make a difference. And in terms of, this is why I've been on the side of, like, maybe it would have been good to sign a Rizzo for over the course of 5 years, because you look at this year's free agent class, and if you don't get Ohtani, then now what? Like, at least they extended Ian Happ, who might have been the second best offensive player on the market. So I think my prediction here is just based off human elements and Jed Hoyer not wanting to deal with the freak out from the people who have been, like, most supportive of him, and like, all the Jed's leaguers in the world I've seen already sort of pre-melting down about like the idea of selling off again. And I think the Ricketts are probably wimping out a little bit, maybe too. And I'm not saying wimping out thinking that, like, you should sell, but I think if you were going by the numbers and what you're projecting, I think that is where it's trending right now. So my prediction is that they don't really sell, but that maybe they should. What are you guys feeling?
Pat,
I think that there are 4 things that could happen which would put the Cubs in a position where they should not sell and will not sell. 1, Bellinger comes back, plays reasonably well.
That's big, yeah.
2, Mervis, figures things out after a little bit of an adjustment period, or somebody like him, and can solidify first base. Either that, or Trey Mancini goes on a hot streak. Some production out of what's one of the more valuable offensive positions on the field. 3, either Wisniewski or Kyle Hendricks puts out a little bit of run in games where they actually can help kind of get that starting rotation anchored somewhat. And this is all predicated on Steele not being out for the year, which would change everything. But let's say one of either Wisniewski or Hendricks, not even both, but just one of them, start pitching like a solid pitcher. And then maybe a Cody Hoyer or somebody from AAA comes up and gives them one more arm out of the pen that can strike people out and can help when, say, a Mark Leader, an Alzolay, or Merriweather, whoever else is pitching that, 2 or 3 days in a row, when you just have one more arm to help you get through. Because it feels like in a lot of these games that they lose, it's like if they only had one more good pitcher who could come in, whether it's in the 7th, 8th, or 9th. If they
and the bullpen has to be better.
Yeah, it does.
Like, it just will be, I think. Like, I do believe that.
If they could do those 4 things in this division, which is not great. Now, I will also acknowledge that there are teams in this division who are underperforming themselves, and they'll probably be better too. It's not, you can't just say that, well, we'll get better and everyone else will stay the same. There'll be some improvements. I don't think the Cardinals will play .417 baseball the entire season. I think they'll be a little bit better. I think the Brewers, have a possibility of continuing to play as they are a little bit better. Maybe not the Pirates or the Reds as much. I think, I have less respect for their overall performances. But I think the Cubs could find themselves in this unique and yet awkward position of being a game or 2 out at the end of July. And then what do? You might be in 1 game over 500 or 1 game under 500, but only a game out of first place. And in that situation, I agree with Kevin that the Ricketts won't have the stomach to sell. They'll think, well, we got to go for it. We saw what happened last year at the Phillies, and we've seen Washington in the past, and you never know, lightning in a bottle, blah, blah, blah. And that could all happen. And if it does, I think they'll go through the rest of the season. They might get eliminated in like a 3-game play-in game or series or whatever, but at least they'll be in it, I guess, right? And trying.
I think you'd have, and that would have to be from where we started. And I always struggle with this because, like, what do you call a successful season? And it's like, successful from where opening day was, but it's also like giving yourself credit for, like, drunk landing a plane when you got drunk before you got behind, before you pulled a Denzel Washington on the plane. Like, you put yourself here. So it's only sort of successful, like, look through a certain lens. But still, if you get into any sort of playoff, I think with this team, that's a successful year. And I also think just from a sell-off, you'd be selling off to get players that would be good when. Like, this has to be over. You know,
it has to end at some point. I appreciate the flight reference, deep cut there, but
thank you.
But also, I think if that scenario plays out and you don't sell off at the trading deadline, I think it's imperative then to try to lock up Stroman before the season.
100%.
Because otherwise you really are just sitting. You know, you're doing nothing then. If you're going to not sell off, then because you've got a little bit of a prayer, but then you're also going to let your best pitcher walk at the end of the year. That's a no-go, I think.
Yeah, I fully agree. It seems so obvious. It seems like there's only two choices there. But
when people say, "Well, will you be buyers of the trade deadline?" You know what? I would be satisfied with re-signing Stroman, and that would be our buy at the trade deadline.
That's a buy.
Sure.
You know,
I mean, that's signing an ace on the offseason. I mean, that is if you extend him. I mean, I was genuinely very happy with them extending Hap when they did. I was shocked when they did, and that's locking up a good Major League Baseball player. You see people being like, well, but they got two outfielders there, and you have to have spots for Canario or Alcantara or PCA or Brennan Davis.
You just have
you don't.
You don't.
You just don't. You just don't need spots for people who aren't here yet.
They've got spots in South Bend, so they'll be fine.
Right. They will get a spot if it's time for them to get a spot. They will. I'm not worried about clogging up a spot with a good Major League Baseball player. So if they do that, if they clog up one of those rotation spots, and if it makes it harder for Jordan Wicks to crack the rotation, I'm fine with that because Marcus Stroman's really good. So yeah.
And under that scenario, Stroman and Steele. And under that scenario, you've got Wisniewski probably stepping up. You know, you can kind of see when you squint a playoff rotation down the road.
Totally.
You know, for next year and beyond. So you can maybe make the run, either miss the playoffs, get in and get killed. Who cares? But either way, you look at next year with hope and with the thought of we're building on something rather than we're tearing it all down and starting from scratch again. Or we're not doing anything, and then we're going to lose our best player. Those scenarios suck. Like you want your starting rotation to be better next year than it is this year. I think.
Yeah. And selfishly, as podcasters, we stare down that schedule, and it's the end of June, and we're like, oh my God, there's so many more weeks to go. Please don't sell off. Please be good and interesting.
What was your first year? I know I've asked this before. It
was 2013. Yeah.
Incredible time to start. I mean, you've probably heard me on air threaten to quit my own podcast a number of times already. I'm basically only personally committing through the trade deadline emotionally. So God bless you guys for.
Oh no, we said this, like, we can't do another year like last year, and we can't it's getting too hard after 10 years, and yeah, we've said, like, if they do us wrong, we will have to have a serious conversation about whether this is our the last months is just our farewell tour, and we call it a podcast. But no, that's I'm hoping that it's at least, so far I think this team has been significantly more entertaining than last year. This team's
agreed.
It's been fun. It's been there's been good performances. The bad has been horrible. I mean, when they get blown out and position players are happy, it's been a lot of peaks and valleys. But what we've seen,
and that's the thing, right? It's so frustrating this year because there are pieces here that you say are parts of the puzzle, and then the pieces that aren't part of the puzzle are like not even pieces at all. They're just it's like they gave us a puzzle with missing like 9 pieces here, and that's how it feels with some of the positions that are just absolute black holes, especially offensively. And that's the frustrating part, is how do we take the sort of what we call, I guess, our core, for lack of better terms, and then augment that with players who are very good. Like, it's great to have Horner and Swanson and Hack and Suzuki as 4 of your core pieces moving forward. That's almost half of an entire lineup, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a Freddie Freeman at first base, or Rizzo, or a slugger at third, somebody else who you say, hey, this guy is going to be like a cleanup hitter. In addition to all those guys, that's what a good team has.
Yeah, and I think that's what has made it so difficult for me, like emotionally, to be invested as a Cubs fan, as someone who's been tremendously invested my whole life. Every year is not only is it the frustration within this year, but I can't stop looking at what they chose not to do to put themselves in this position, and that's not fun. That's not a fun way to fan. That's not a fun way to talk. But you're naming like cornerstones, and it's like, not only were they out there from other teams, some of them were here already, and the free agent classes coming up don't, outside of like the greatest free agent of all time, possibly. It's there's not a lot to look at.
It never stopped the Cardinals though from making trades to get Goldschmidt or Arenado.
That's the big difference.
Murphy. We could have had a catcher. Like we could have had a catcher. You know. It didn't have to be Contreras. That would have made everybody happy. A good catcher and it's not Contreras, everybody would have been happy. But and we could have gotten one for fairly cheap. We could have given up one of our 12 outfielders in the minors. And yet, here we are with Tucker Barnhart rocking a 21 OPS plus below not John Lester's best year, below his middle of the pack years offensively.
There's somewhere in between the Cardinals able to get Arenado for free and Goldschmidt for nothing. There's somewhere in between that and the Padres getting Juan Soto. There's somewhere in between there where you can get really good players through trades, and the Cubs aren't one of those teams that makes the big trade, especially when the free agent class is where it's at. Yeah,
I hope they feel like they're close enough competitively at this point where if they have the opportunity, they'll jump on it. But this last offseason, they seemed squeamish about doing that. They got Swanson, which was great, but the trades is what they, to get these final pieces that they need.
Yeah, I mean, that is a huge part of it too, because that is a massive part of my disappointment with this regime too, because you don't have to necessarily get the top free agent every time. Would be nice if you did any time, but you can also there are other team presidents and general managers making the deals you just said. We didn't even reference the Mookie Betts trade. We didn't reference, there's superstars to be had every year somewhere. And at some point, as the Chicago frigging Cubs, you have to expect more of your organization than replacement level or average level management. Like, I'm not saying Jed Hoyer's incompetent. I don't think he is. I think he needs to be better than whatever he's been to this point. I think you need to be able to pull off the home run trade at some point. You need to have balls for it, and you need to be able to close the deal on it. And the farm system's a little deeper now, and there's some upside in there where, I think that is we talk about the big holes that need filling, and I think it's coming up. It has to be within the next year that one of those deals is pulled off. Otherwise, you just didn't do enough.
And I honestly, I think this is right up to Ricketts' alley, taking advantage of poor people, right? So,
yes,
take advantage of the poor teams.
I mean, Dad Ricketts and Nebraska Ricketts are going to get involved if you tempt them with that. They'll work the phone.
I look at Colorado, and I look at some of these other teams. I look at the Marlins, and I'm like, certainly we can't just buy one of these guys and give them some. Especially if somebody's heaven forbid arbitration eligible, they don't want that. That might cost them money.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the advantage. This is the one part of my life, because I'm a Cubs fan. I'm like, well, now I'm a capitalist. I fully do that. That's the advantage we have. Swing it.
And it's extra infuriating because you watch the Dodgers be a large market team and do exactly that. You mentioned the Mookie Betts trade. Then they turn around and they sign Freddie Freeman, and we're just sad. We just have nothing.
They can do that. They can do it while managing to build a farm system too. It's not one or the other.
No. They have players playing that are great, and then they can turn around. They're going to add more at this year's deadline by trading those people away, and then they're also at the same time clearing the deck because they're going to make a play at Ohtani, and it's completely nuts watching a real organization like that and seeing that the Cubs are more trying to be like the Cardinals, and it's like no. Try to be that team. That team is your payroll, your market. That's what you should be idolizing and trying to be like.
And I will admit that buying players doesn't always work. But I'd be willing to give it a go. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes it does.
Let's see what happens. You
Yeah.
never know. Worst case scenario, you have a superstar on your team. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Right.
you're not as good as you'd like. I grew up with that. And I grew up with Andre Dawson and Ryan Sandberg. We had a lot of superstars on the team. And we had Mark Grace. We had Maddox. We had, Lee Smith. And yeah, did they win? Not as much as we'd like. But boy, it's a lot more fun when you've got the best player on the field, doesn't it?
Huge. Yeah. And I like being entertained too.
Yes.
And I like liking the humans on my team. I like all these elements of a thing. But
All right, last question from me to both of you. This came from a Twitter asking, who can the Cubs beat in a best-of-7 series? Which teams in Major League Baseball do you think the Cubs could defeat in a best-of-7 series? I'll throw it out there to either one of you. Oakland A's are a given, right? So
sure. So we're saying total. We're not just teams that might play in a 7-game series. That means something.
Yeah.
I mean, what? I think they're, I guess without going into like pitching matchups, I think coming into the year, I was looking at it and I was like, I hope the Cubs are the 13th best team in the majors. Like in a realistic way. So I think they could beat up to, maybe up to 19 teams. I think they would be favored or should beat right at half. I don't know.
Yeah. I think they would I guess it definitely, but they'd certainly be heavy favorites against the Royals and the A's.
Yeah.
I think that's a given.
Yeah.
There are teams that I truly believe the Cubs would beat. I would bet, my life savings on it if I had one. But teams like the Rockies, I think, are quite beatable. I would say the Reds, although they did sweep us in 3, but that's not best of 7. That's we beat them the next 4.
That's again, right. That's again one of those things where it's like, well, if they can't beat the Reds, I'm uninterested going forward. Like they just have to be able to.
The Nationals are very beatable, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
The entire American League Central outside of Twins, seems very beatable. But those are games, the series like Cleveland, Detroit, White Sox, those are teams I think the Cubs would be favored against for the most part. But, baseball's a weird game, and we want to be heavy favorites. We would be favorites. So I think you look at it and you break it down, and you're at about half or almost half the teams. And then there are teams like the Phillies where they're about the same record as the Cubs. But, boy, I look at some of the Phillies players, and I'm like, maybe they're better than us.
Right. They're more of that's a team with the stars, and maybe, their holes are comparable. That's not a filthy thing to say. That doesn't sound good.
No.
But, yeah.
And there are teams like the Giants who every year seem pretty beatable, but seem to do well. That's a franchise that seems to win a lot of games despite itself. I don't know how they do it, frankly. I wish we could do that every year. Even when they're sort of mediocre, they're not that bad. Like they pull off. You look at their franchise records from year to year, and I don't remember them winning 94 games that year.
Right. Oh, they're just San Francisco is just exceedingly competent, but it seems like they will make the offers for the superstars, but it's easier to get them here than it is to get them there.
Like, for example, in 2021, which was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
They won 107 games.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
I remember watching Chris Bryant there down the stretch and being like, but then, it's again, what
That's
do
a lot
the
of games?
It's a lot of games. I mean, are there 10 teams that have won more than that, like in the past decade? In the regular season, I can't imagine there is. But yeah, I think like the Cubs have set their ambition at like, we hope to be an everything breaks right Giants. And the Giants have a lot of money, but you can't. We just also haven't proven ourselves to be that as competent as them. So you have to go bigger. But I think that seems like about the right level.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense to me. I think. I don't think they're favorable against any teams in the AL East. I think the AL East, the entire division, would be favored against the Cubs.
Yeah.
Plus, those teams are playing each other. and they're still better than us. I mean,
they're all over 500, and they're all playing each other, which is crazy.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, I can't believe it. We're up against time already. Time flies when we're having fun talking Cubs with Kevin. Kevin, please remind all of our listeners.
Oh, Jeremy, wait, Jeremy, one more, just 30 seconds. What are we going to do this week?
Oh, you want to make some predictions?
Absolutely.
All right, we can do predictions. Then
7 games.
Yeah. Then we're gonna wrap it up. All right, we will include the last San Diego game here in our predictions. So we're looking at 7 games between now and the next time we podcast. 3 at LA Angels and 3 against the San Francisco Giants that we just talked about there.
Ohtani's been pulled out of that series, by the way.
Ohtani will not
later in the week.
Correct. Will not pitch in the series against the Cubs.
Doesn't want to pitch against his
he's scared.
Future teammates.
Yeah.
So over the next 7, Kevin, what do you have for the Cubs record this week?
I'll say 4-3 because I think you have to score more runs at some point, and I think the pitching is looking decent. I know we're saying this before Hendricks takes the mound tonight. I'm sure my favorite dude will get rocked to hurt me, but his stuff has looked good. Like, I think the ball's moving out of his hand. I think the pitching should stay good. And the teams are playing just aren't that good. I mean, so I'll say I'll give an optimistic 4-3 on that.
Pat?
I'm right there with Kevin. I think they're going to be 4-3. We've got Hendricks twice. We've got Wisniewski twice. We've got Teon and Smiley. So under my 4-pronged theory, either Hendricks or Wisniewski is going to start putting it together. Maybe both. Who knows? And I think the Cubs. These are not unbeatable teams they're playing. These are all teams in that category we just discussed. Are teams that we might or might not be able to beat in a 7-game series. Well, same holds true for a 3-game series.
Yeah.
So 4-3.
I make it
Plus,
unanimous.
The luck factor, like the lack of luck they've had offensively, has to even out at some point, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like you said, Mervis part of that. It's like someone's got to come up to average.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you keep swinging, you're going to hit the ball eventually.
Yeah.
2 out of 3 in against the Angels is totally possible, and then 1 out of 3 in San Francisco also totally possible.
You should do. Yeah.
And you steal Game 4 tonight.
And you steal Game 4 tonight. So I think that's I think it's a unanimous decision. 4 victories.
It's almost too easy, really, when you think about it.
And then it'll be a day off when we come back to return for our podcast next week. So Cubs will return for a homestand to take on Pittsburgh for 3 and then the Baltimore Orioles for 3. And
weird.
I went to a Cubs-Orioles game at Wrigley Field last year, and it was crazy how many Baltimore fans traveled for that game. I was shocked.
Have you been to Baltimore? I mean, there's a reason they come here, and I have a lot of friends in Baltimore. In fact, I'll be there tomorrow. But they prefer. They like their field, but they love Chicago. So.
Yeah. The O's were really during the anthem. I remember really standing out last year. It was like a lot of O's.
Absolutely. All right. Now with that, we're going to wrap it up. We're calling it a podcast. Kevin, please remind our listeners where they can find all of your work on the internet and how they can take part and watch your comedy.
Well, you can talking about calling things a podcast. You can call my podcast a podcast. It's at Away Games Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, all the things. Myself and another comedian named Adam Mamawala do a Cubs podcast every week. So there's that. If you happen to be into Sex in the City or Bridgerton, myself and a very funny comedy writer named John Daly have a podcast called Sex in the City. It's one called the Bridgerton Bros. Those actually make me money, so that's nice. So you can listen to those, and you can just find me at Kevin McCaffrey on all the things. I'm posting stand-up clips and upcoming dates when I'm traveling around. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all the things is just at Kevin McCaffrey.
Always a great time. Thanks for coming on. And I think we're going to wrap it up here. Pat, any last words before we call it a show?
I'm excited about the week ahead. I think this is going to be the turning point in the Cubs season. Or not.
Yeah. Undeniably, I'll say.
Well said, as always. Eloquent, and puts the exclamation point on another great show. Pat, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.